This is BBC One. Good afternoon. In 2 minutes, the start of the new regular weekday News Afternoon, presented by Richard Whitmore and Moira Stewart. It's 12:30 and time for News Afternoon with Richard Whitmore and Moira Stewart.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to News Afternoon, the first television news of the day. And today's headlines: at Blackpool, the TUC's annual conference has opened with a strong attack from this year's president, Mr. Alan Fisher. He's angry and frustrated by what he calls the rapid, savage and dramatic destruction of jobs. In Manchester, a man still missing after the big chemical fire, and Polish troops and police are still surrounding the jail in Bydgoszcz, where prisoners are demanding widespread reforms. And news is just coming in that Iranian students have taken over the Iranian consulate in London.
During the programme, we'll be hearing from an expert who says the way we teach young children to read is all wrong. We visit a thread factory which has found a profitable sideline in Eels. And now that granny bonds can be bought by anyone, we ask if they're still a bargain.
First, though, the curtain raiser to the big season of conferences ahead, the TUC's annual conference, which got underway in Blackpool this morning. It opened with this year's president, Alan Fisher, telling delegates he viewed his time in office with a deep sense of anger and frustration at the rapid, savage and dramatic destruction of jobs. He warned the government that they're not there forever. And there was a warning from the Labour Party from its own chairman, Mr. Alex Kitson. He appealed to the three candidates for the deputy leadership not to whip up bad publicity for Labour in the final weeks of their campaigns. Well, Ian Ross is in Blackpool to report for us on the TUC conference.
To quote first Mr. Alan Fisher, this Congress will cry out for many things. The cries are likely to be all the more strident and intemperate because of the union movement's present isolation, its frustration at being denied a say in the economic management of the country. So the pervading feeling of this opening session, and no doubt much of the rest of the week, is strongly anti-government. This 113th conference underlines the extent to which rising unemployment has resulted in falling union membership. There was a drop of close on 600,000 last year, and it will fall by almost as many this year. Reflecting on his year in office, Alan Fisher spoke of the TUC's frustration with a government that will not listen.
To reason, their only response to argument is to repeat parrot fashion those outworn phrases they first picked up from Milton Friedman. Talking to this government is like trying to hold a conversation with a speaking clock. Indeed, it's worse. Worse, because unlike Margaret and Geoffrey, who seem to get everything wrong, at least Tim tells you the right time. Government may turn a deaf ear when we tell them about the real world, but that's no reason for us to stop articulating our own policies. Indeed, in the face of the claim that there is no alternative to the present policies, we must show up the fallacy of that claim. We've done that, firstly, in our own economic review, Plan for Growth, where we've developed the arguments put forward in specific sectors. We've done it in our plans for the regeneration of our inner cities, and most recently, the General Council has done that in the plan for the reconstruction of Britain.
Well, much of that plan for reconstruction is being worked on with the Labour Party through the Liaison Committee. The issue of the leadership of the Labour Party, although not on the conference agenda, is very much to the fore. One of the three contestants for the deputy leadership, John Silkin, sat watching proceedings this morning. He'll join Messrs Healy and Benn at a vote-catching fringe meeting on Thursday, anxious to know whether his own union, the big transport workers, intends to throw its weight behind him. Well, that union's acting leader, Alex Kitson, and this year's Labour Party chairman, will tell this Congress in a few minutes' time that it was the right, and is the right, of anyone to seek election to the highest offices of the party. And he'll point out the post of deputy leader, while symbolic, has hardly been the historical centre of power within the Labour movement.
Ian, thank you very much. Len Murray has said that pay and jobs are going to be the main features of the conference, but is it not inevitable that the confusion and the troubles in the Labour Party will be bound almost to come into it?
Well, first of all, unemployment will certainly be the main talking point. They're very concerned about the high level, close on 3 million, very concerned about youth unemployment and the ineffectiveness of some of the special measures being taken by government on youth training. Pay, not really. Free collective bargaining is still very much the watchword. Trade union legislation, that's the burning issue. We'll see that this afternoon. There's great feeling about what's been done so far in this field, the 1980 Employment Act, and the measures still to come, the cutting down of trade union immunities. But of course the Labour Party deputy leadership, while not, as I say, on the agenda, is very much on the fringe of this meeting, and we'll see Messrs Benn and Healy arriving in the next day or two and joining the fringe of this conference and trying to exercise pressure on the way the unions cast their votes at the Labour Party conference later this month.
Yes, you say they're on the fringe at the moment, but could it become more than that, do you think?
Not really, because people like Len Murray and other trade union leaders do try and divorce trade union business from that of the Labour Party, and they don't like to see too intimate connection being built up there. They're quite happy to acknowledge the work done on the TUC Labour Party Liaison Committee, preparing for an incoming Labour administration. But they do like to see the unions divorced from the party.
Thank you very much, Ian Ross.
Now the big fire at a chemical factory at Stalybridge in Greater Manchester. It caused a series of explosions which threw 40-gallon drums of chemicals into the air. About 300 families had to be evacuated from their homes. Most of them were allowed back around breakfast time. More details from our reporter, Alistair MacDonald.
Searing flames swept through the chemical factory in one of the biggest fires in Greater Manchester for more than a decade. The blaze began shortly before midnight as drums of highly inflammable chemicals were being loaded onto a lorry. A huge explosion rocked the factory, and two men who were handling the drums were caught by the full force of the blast. One is now in hospital with extensive burns. The other man, a driver, is still missing. Within minutes, several single and two-storey buildings were burning fiercely. Firemen manned dozens of hoses as flames leapt hundreds of feet into the air, but for several hours it was impossible to reduce the intense heat. At the height of the blaze, 200 firemen and almost 40 appliances from Greater Manchester and other brigades were fighting the fire. As 45-gallon drums of chemical solvent ignited, explosions could be heard 5 miles away. There were fears that some of the burning chemicals might give off toxic fumes, and 300 families living nearby had to leave their homes. This morning, a pall of smoke hung over the remains of the factory as firemen damped down the last of the flames, but there was little left. Damage is estimated at hundreds of thousands of pounds. The explosion had rocked the village of Carbrook next to the works, smashing windows and hurling drums of chemicals 70 feet into the air. Some were thrown hundreds of feet beyond the factory fence and landed on houses nearby. The 2,000 people living in the village say they feared an accident like this for years, ever since the Flixborough disaster. For 3 years, they've campaigned to get the factory closed down, but factory inspectors and other experts said there was no danger. A few months ago, the local council demanded the removal of hundreds of drums of chemicals in the factory yard as a condition of a planning application for some new buildings. But the firm said this morning they hadn't had time to remove all the drums. Now local activists and 2 MPs say they want a full inquiry. And we've just heard a body has been recovered from the debris.
Iranian students opposed to Ayatollah Khomeini took over the Iranian consulate in Kensington in London this morning for about half an hour. They said it was a peaceful protest against the present regime in Iran. A few minutes ago, the police said they had made 30 arrests. We hope to have pictures from the scene later in this programme. Now, the big protest in Poland by prisoners in the jail in the northern city of Bydgoszcz. It happened at a delicate time for the Polish government. The trade union Solidarity is continuing its conferences in defiant mood in Gdansk, and thousands of Warsaw-packed troops are holding exercises around Poland. The prison revolt began with a mass breakout by about 150 prisoners. This was followed by the occupation of part of the prison by another 150. They barricaded themselves in and hung out placards, protesting about prison conditions and the alleged shooting of a prisoner who had tried to escape earlier. Solidarity leaders are negotiating on behalf of the prisoners. At their headquarters in Bydgoszcz, they heard evidence about systematic brutality in the prison from a young inmate. He is not a convict like most of the others, but is awaiting trial. Solidarity say the authorities have now agreed to 12 of the prisoners' 28 demands. Police and troops are still surrounding the prison. The authorities say they've recaptured 25 of the prisoners who escaped and that others have given themselves up. Any inland site for a third London airport is unthinkable, says Professor Sir Colin Buchanan. He wrote a powerful dissenting note as a member of the Rook Hill Commission on the airport site 10 years ago, and since then has become president of the Council for the Protection of Rural England. His warning is the first shot before 4 inquiries into 4 suggested sites about Stansted later this month, Mappin, Sevenside and a 5th terminal at Heathrow. It comes in a book he's written which is published today. Our air correspondent Christopher Wayne looks at the mounting wave of opposition led by Sir Colin.
Harvest time in Essex, and on land which was cultivated before the Romans came to Britain, farmers are facing the possible loss of many hundreds of acres. Flat, well-drained land like this is also ideal for airfields. At present, Stansted is barely used, and the British Airports Authority say it must be expanded to reduce pressure on Heathrow. But the present proposal is only part of the plan. If it included the full amount held in reserve, the resulting airfield would be twice as big as Heathrow. Sir Colin Buchanan, the maverick member of the old Roskill Commission, says the plan amounts to the rape of the English countryside.
The statistical question whether another airport is actually needed is open to debate. But my view is that the experience of the last 20 years has shown that it's virtually impossible to find an inland site because the resistance aroused is so serious, so forcibly expressed that when it comes to the crunch, government just doesn't override it. You can't override that sort of resistance, not in Britain anyhow.
The latest inquiry into the Stansted plan will begin on September the 29th. Local villagers are already planning big protest demonstrations.
But it's not only local residents who object to the idea of Stansted being developed. Here at Heathrow, the airlines are in a fury at the proposal, especially British Airways. They say a move into Essex would mean buying another 50 aircraft, which they can't afford. And in any case, they say you don't need a third London airport. All you need is extra passenger terminal capacity. And that means another terminal, Terminal 5, here at Heathrow.
What they have in mind is the Perry Oaks site, at present used as a sewage disposal plant by the Thames Water Authority. According to British Airways, the total cost of developing this into Terminal 5 would be about £390 million. They say that's less than half the cost of developing Stansted. They also say it wouldn't lead to any more airport noise at Heathrow. The airlines are emphatic that with big jets they don't need more flights, just more buildings to handle passengers.
The Provisional IRA have named a new hunger striker at the Maze prison. He's John Pickering, who's serving 26 years for a number of offences, including murder. His strike begins just after Lawrence McKeown's family ordered medical help after he had refused food for 70 days. McKeown is the 5th prisoner to abandon his fast, and yesterday the small Irish National Liberation Army said they wouldn't be naming any more hunger strikers because they have comparatively few prisoners in the maze. Now, these moves have fueled speculation that the campaign, after 10 deaths, could be nearing an end. And a close observer of these events is David McKittrick, the London editor of the Irish Times, and he's in another of our London studios. Well, first of all, David McKittrick, do you think that there is an end in sight to the hunger strikes?
I think that there is, yes, but I think it's in very long sight because this has been a very messy series of hunger strikes, and I have a feeling that the ending is going to be as messy as the strikes themselves. One of the main troubles here is that there are so many different elements involved. You've got the actual prisoners themselves, you've got the IRA on the outside, you've got the INLA, you've got the overall H-Block committee, and you've got the relatives. Well, at the moment it looks as though the INLA is scaling down its protest, but the provisional IRA papers inside haven't said that they are. I think it will come to an end, but it could be some time yet.
But if the INLA is scaling down its activities in this respect, are not the families also putting pressure on the provisional IRA, perhaps?
That's right, and again there have been complaints from people in the H-Block's committee, notably Bernadette McCalliskey, that the Catholic Church has been putting a lot of pressure on the relatives. So with all these things building up, and of course the certainty now that the British government isn't going to move because it has absorbed, as it were, 10 deaths so far, and really Mrs Thatcher has made the point that there is no limit to the number of deaths that she can envisage there. Faced with that, it means that going on hunger strike in the maze isn't so much a question of dicing with death, but really of facing certain death.
Yes, the smaller INLA said, as you mentioned earlier, that they've not enough members to sustain a long-running hunger strike in the maze. Do you think this is right? Is it perhaps a red herring because they feel they ought to back out now?
Well, the INLA has always been slightly less keen than the provisionals to pursue the hunger strike idea, and my own paper was predicting a couple of weeks ago that something like this would happen. It's partly justification in saying that they haven't got enough to go around, but they've lost heart, and as they said in their statement, what they call the intransigence of the British government was greater than they thought. And
David McKittrick, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
The way primary school children are taught to read has been described as a waste of time by a team of education experts. And the conclusion of a 4-year study by the Manchester School of Education is that major changes are needed. Martin Henfield reports.
This is a common scene in primary schools, a queue of children with spelling problems lining up to see the teacher who's trying to listen to another child read. It's a method that's been used and preferred by teachers for more than 20 years. But according to the researchers, it's inefficient and could hold back a child's progress. They found that the teacher was under such pressure that the average time spent listening to any one child reading was 30 seconds.
Yes, just wait a minute. Now, you've got teacher there, so you can continue with that, can't you, Jane? Off you go back to your seat.
The study, which involved 164 primary schools, found children between the ages of 7 and 9 prefer to read quietly to themselves, and reading progress was greatest in classes where there was the least emphasis on listening to children reading. The study suggests that if less time were taken on correcting spelling, the children would have less frequent but longer and more fruitful contact with their teachers.
We asked children when we interviewed them individually whether they preferred to read silently to themselves or whether they liked to read to someone, and their responses were very illuminating. I'd like to read you one. One child answering this question said, "I like to read to myself. If you say the words wrong, it's easier to yourself. You don't have to stop to get breath. I lose myself in it. I get away from the rest of the class in my head. I work myself into the book." Now that's good, because that child is a real reader.
The researchers found that many basic textbooks were so easy that children could read them without any help at all from the teacher. And in some cases, teachers had underestimated or overestimated a child's reading ability by more than 2 years. The study says school libraries are often inconsistent, with books too hard or too easy for 7 to 9-year-olds. Books it recommends should be graded according to difficulty. The study, which was undertaken for the school's council, was based on the belief that by the age of 7, children had already mastered the initial stages of reading, and the next 2 years were vital if they were to become regular readers.
The so-called mum in a million, who's had 2 boys from separate wombs at Guy's Hospital in London, was getting along fine there this morning. Mrs. Teresa Ebers comes from Orpington in Kent. Her 2 wombs are rare enough, but the chances of her having a pregnancy in both of them was reckoned at 1 in a million. The babies are Simon, who weighed 6 pounds, and Nicky, who is 5.5. They were delivered by an operation, but according to the doctors, they don't count as twins because they developed independently in individual wombs. A Scottish company who, like everyone else, has been feeling the effects of the recession, decided to try something different to maintain full employment. As the world's leading thread makers, they found they could use the hot water produced in the manufacturing process to start an eel farm. And Michael Cole went along to see it.
Eels have been a delicacy in Britain since before the Middle Ages and are still the Cockney's Sunday treat in their jellied form, wobbling around like wonky wheels, as the old song has it. The eel as an export-earning saviour of British industry is a new role for this gastronome's delight, but that's how it's being viewed by the world's biggest thread makers at their Paisley mill just outside Glasgow. Coates Patons, who make 80% of the world's thread, cottoned on to eels as a way of using twice over the 1 million gallons of water a day they need for the textile process. They've set up an eel fishery in a disused treatment plant at the back of the mill. There the water is heated to 23 degrees centigrade, the perfect environment for the growing eel. Instead of taking 10 to 15 years in the wild to grow from a tiny elver into a full-grown adult, the eel takes only 2 years to reach maturity. The last stop on the way to the table is the grading process. Any eel that doesn't make it down the slippery wooden slope falls through the slats and is thrown back to grow some more before it's ready. What's claimed to be the world's only warm water circulation system has been developed, and now the farm produces 1 million eels a year, 80% of them for export, mainly to the continent. The eels are smoked in Scotland and sold either whole or filleted. There's a strong demand from top restaurants and London stores, where a packet of fillets might sell for £5. But the British housewife is wary of anything that looks so much like a snake.
I don't think many British housewives have thought of buying eels, unless they've been abroad and they've tasted them there and they know what they're like. To take the first step and actually go out and buy some smoked eels, particularly as it's not an inexpensive product, it's a very big step. I'm quite sure that through education, offering samples to ordinary people, that's how it's got to be done, and I'm quite sure we will succeed.
The fishery is hoping that the humble eel might capture a slice of the luxury market for so long dominated by Scottish smoked salmon. And to that end, has adopted for its name the ancient Scottish word ishcan, the Gaelic for eel.
Now, the City News: in the stock market, share prices have continued their steady fall. At noon, the Financial Times share index was down 7.6 at 547.3, and the pound was also down. It lost 2.2 cents to stand at 1.82 exactly.
Granny bonds become people's bonds today. These savings certificates with the interest guarantee to keep pace with inflation used to be just for the over 60s and more recently for the over 50s. Now they're available to all. Many people will still think them a good buy, even if inflation is coming down slowly. But for the less convinced, Mark Rogerson has been considering the options.
For anyone with a bit of cash to spare for saving, there's an almost alarming choice in the high street. The banks, the building societies, Post Office National Saving, they're all after your money. But granny bonds, or perhaps we should call them people's bonds, now anyone can buy them, are something different. They're guaranteed against inflation. You buy them at post offices in any amount from £10 to £3,000, and you must leave your money in for at least a year to qualify. If prices rise by 10% in that year, a £100 investment will be worth £110. And they keep on rising in line with inflation for 5 years. Then there's a bonus, all tax-free. But there are other things you can do with your savings. The building societies have a whole range of deals, lump sum and instalment. And the deposit with a building society may help if you're after a mortgage. But you've no guarantee that the interest paid will beat inflation. Or there's always the banks. They haven't got as many savings plans as the building societies. But if you've just got a few pounds you need in a hurry to pay your bills, the bank's as good a place as any. Thank you. So the new granny bonds for all may not be for you if you need to get at your savings soon, or if you want an income from the money to live on. But if you've got some cash that you're happy to salt away for a year or so, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that whatever the government or Sheikh Yamani or anybody does to the cost of living, your savings will be safe from inflation.
Now back to the brief takeover of the Iranian consulate in London by Iranian students opposed to the Ayatollah Khomeini. The takeover lasted no more than half an hour. Scotland Yard say they have now arrested 30 people. The takeover began at about midday when a group calling themselves Mojahedin Organisation of Iran went into the consulate in Kensington. They issued a statement saying that it was a peaceful protest against the Khomeini regime. They were not holding the staff hostage, nor had they any intention of causing any damage. In the past few weeks, there have been several similar takeovers by anti-Khomeini groups at Iran's diplomatic buildings in Germany, Holland, Belgium, Norway and America.
And those scenes from central London just a short time ago end this first programme of the new News Afternoon. The time is just coming up to 5 minutes to 1.
And that means it's time for the weather this afternoon from Jack Scott.
Good afternoon to you. Well, the weather's entering a new phase, which is a nice way of saying that you've seen the last of that nice, hot, sunny summer weather, because the high pressure that brought it has pulled back, as you can see, right back across the continent now, and in its place we're getting low, low, low. Those barometer bashers among you must have noticed that the pressure's been falling quite quickly in the last 24 hours, and the result is that we have these fronts coming in towards the country carrying some rain. In fact, some rain's already arrived in southern parts and is working its way up the western side as well. What we're going to see happening over the next 24 hours is that these fronts will move quite steadily northeastwards, carrying rain with them as they go, and at the same time this front here, a cold front, will be edging towards us, and within a couple of days we'll all get into these colder northwesterlies behind there, so a dramatic change by then in the temperatures that we've been experiencing. But back to today's weather now for a look at that, and as I say, the rain's already got into the Channel Islands, southwest England, a little bit of rain here and there in the southern part of the country, and it's working its way up the western side, so that in Wales it'll become rather persistent later on in the afternoon, and very shortly now you'll find the first of the rain arriving into Northern Ireland, and it looks a fairly wet afternoon from then on in there. Now the rain in the southern parts here will potter on and off right through the afternoon, rather more than you've seen just now, and then as time goes by it'll work its way through East Anglia, and this brighter weather through most of the afternoon in northern parts of England will darken up, and you'll get some rain in that area. But eastern Scotland looks as though throughout today it'll stay bright and dry and fairly warm up on the Murray coast there. But on the western side of Scotland it has been dull with a little drizzle already. That's another lot that's moving away out, and you'll find it drying up and even perhaps brightening up before evening time today. Temperatures, well, down the eastern side of the country, apart from northeast England, it's still going to be a warm day, but that's the last warm day that you'll see of that sort anyway. And then tonight, well, apart from the northeasternmost part of Scotland there, it looks as though anywhere in the country you'll see some rain from time to time. And if I can remind you of what I said about the following 2 days, it does look as though as time goes by we're not going to have any settled weather for a couple of days anyway, and as time goes by it'll get cooler and cooler. That's it. Good afternoon to you.
Jack, thank you very much. Sounds as though winter's on the way. Well, after weather news, financial news. Here's Peter Day.
City investors spent the weekend digesting Friday's sharp fall in the stock market, the biggest drop for 4 months. The decline was largely a British reaction to gloom in the New York stock market. Wall Street is still obsessed by America's sky-high interest rates, which have spread like influenza all over the world. This morning in London there have been no second thoughts about the big share price collapse, and little very inspiring from a clutch of economic reports which landed on the desks of the big investors first thing this morning. Influential stockbrokers seem to agree that the recession here may have stopped getting worse, but recovery is still stuttering. With that decided lack of interest, the Financial Times index dropped another 7.5 points this morning. A takeover talking point, the ever-ready battery company, now called Berwick, have rejected Friday night's bid from Sir James Hanson's Hanson Trust Group, worth £73 million. And more important to the city, Berwick's share price this morning has shot up to well above the offer price. That's a sign Hanson may have to raise the bidding. A bank holiday in the United States is keeping the foreign exchanges quiet. In a Labor Day message, President Reagan has said that American inflation is beginning to come under control, but the foreign exchanges are suspicious. They think American interest rates will stay high to fight inflation, suspicion which again boosted the dollar this morning and knocked the pound down 2.25 cents.
Thank you, Peter. Now the news this afternoon with subtitles.